Now, tomorrow, the Prime Minister will announce his plan for living with COVID in England, ending most of the remaining restrictions on freedoms that have been with us throughout the pandemic. The legal requirement to self-isolate if you have COVID will go to be replaced by guidance and personal responsibility. So, will the Labour Party back him? I'm joined by Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you support this government's decision to end legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive for COVID?
Well, as you said there, it seems that the government is going to still issue guidance telling people they should isolate if they're positive. The key thing is people need to know. So I'm very worried by the reports that the Prime Minister's planning to end free access to testing, because as we've seen throughout the pandemic, and we particularly saw over the Christmas and New Year period, people are keen to do the right thing, whether to protect family members, particularly older or clinically extremely vulnerable family members, but also to be responsible to their co-workers, friends. So we know that testing is popular. It's a crucial defence, and ending free testing now is a bit like being 2-1 up with 10 minutes left of play and taking your best defender off the pitch.
But do you support the government's decision to end the legal requirement to self-isolate?
At this stage, I mean, we don't want restrictions to be in place longer than is necessary, which is why we published our plan for living well with COVID back in January. At this stage, I think at this stage, the Prime Minister risks muddying the waters, and so we want to see the government publish the scientific advice, because at the moment this seems very premature. It seems like Boris Johnson is keen to declare victory before the war is over, in the hopes he gets some headlines about, Victory Day on COVID, instead of police officers asking questions about actions in number 10.
But I'm still not clear whether you think they're doing the right thing. Do you support the fact that they're not going to continue with this legal requirement to self-isolate?
At this stage, it doesn't seem responsible to, on one hand, go for all these headlines saying we're ending the legal requirement to stay at home, but on the other hand say, but there's guidance that you should still do that, at the same time as removing the testing. So the question about whether it's a legal requirement, whether it's guidance, is a largely secondary issue. The key thing is that people have access to free testing, they know their status, and they do the right thing by staying at home, which means they also need access to the right level of sick pay to do the right thing. And frankly, it's negligent that the government haven't acted already on that issue too.
But it is a very crucial point, isn't it? It's a big moment if you stop the legal requirement to self-isolate. So if you...
It is a big moment. I think we want to see the scientific advice behind it, because I'm not clear that scientists are calling for it.
OK, so you don't think it's the right thing to do right now?
Well, our position all the way through has been to follow the science, work constructively with the government where we can. I'm not clear that the scientific advice supports this. The Prime Minister's got 24 hours or so before he makes his statement to convince us. So you should ask him when he comes on what scientific advice he's following in order to make this decision. If he's following scientific advice, the Labour Party will do the same. If he's deviating from the scientific advice, then he can't count on Labour support.
You know what the scientific advice as well is. And so if you were Health Secretary now, if you were Prime Minister now, would you be ending this requirement or not?
Well, two things. I don't think it's right that we should effectively declare victory before the war is won and have a free-for-all where people don't know their status and aren't required to stay at home even if they do test positive. That's the wrong thing to do right now. There's a broader issue about how you live well with COVID, which is a whole strategy. We published ours in January, and we'll see if the government's matches up tomorrow. But we published a plan which was about the sensible mitigations we need to put in place, both to exit the pandemic safely, but also prepare us for the risk of future variants, new variants, which may be harmful and present a risk. And so that's a whole range of things which don't impact on people's lives, livelihoods or liberties, but would be sensible precautions and defences to exit the pandemic safely, but also prepare us for the risk of future dangerous
I just want to be really clear about this. I mean, this is what the NHS Confederation, they speak for the NHS, 75% of senior staff in England don't want self-isolation rules to end. The British Medical Association, the decision to remove all restrictions is not based on current evidence and is premature. The World Health Organization, I think it's very unwise indeed. I really don't understand why it's being introduced at the moment. So if you're following the science, if that's
look, to be crystal clear about this, I'm sorry if I'm not being clear already, we would stand with the NHS Confederation, the World Health Organization and the scientific advice over Boris Johnson any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Of course we would. So the question you should ask Boris Johnson in a short while is what advice is he following? What's the scientific basis for making this decision? Because if he's not got any new evidence to show us, if there's no scientific opinion that supports it, he can't count on Labour support. I think that's clear.
OK, so you are going to oppose the government on this then? You do do not agree with the government. That's what I'm trying to get to. You don't agree with the government that they are going to end self-isolation.
At this stage, it's not the right thing to do. And I think you've got to be kind of tough on the Prime Minister here, because on one hand, he's saying we want to end the legal requirements in order to declare victory on COVID and get some headlines that aren't about the police knocking on the door of number 10. But on the other hand, he's saying, oh, but the guidance is you should still stay at home, but I'm not going to give you access to free tests in order to make the right and informed decisions. And I'm not going to provide a level of sick pay to make sure that you're not forced to choose between doing the right thing by public health or doing the right thing by putting food on the table for your family. So, I do think there are glaring inconsistencies here in the government's approach. And it does seem to me that the whole decision-making process in number 10 at the moment is being driven by the Prime Minister's political weakness, not by public health. And that should concern all of us.
Let's talk about the Labour Party. The Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, said this week that police officers should shoot terrorists and ask questions second. Is Labour now a shoot first, ask questions later party?
Well, she didn't say it this week. She said it in an interview with Matt Ford some time ago.
Week, yeah.
And very clearly in the context of where you have a live terrorist threat, of course police officers should take immediate action, potentially fatal action, if it saves the lives of others. And look, I make no apology for that, and neither does Angela Rayner, neither does the Labour Party. We are very clear about where we stand on tough action on terrorism and doing the right thing to protect the lives of others. And that's the context in which Angela made those remarks.
So she was right. She was right to say that.
Of course, well, I think it's plainly obvious, isn't it? If you've got look, Angela's a Greater Manchester MP, and we remember what happened in that terrible suicide bombing at the Ariana Grande concert. If a police officer, an armed police officer, has an opportunity to shoot a terrorist in order to save the lives of others, of course they should pull the trigger.
Do you agree with your Shadow Justice Secretary, Steve Reed, that Corbyn's Labour cared more about criminals than victims?
Well, I think that's the perception that took hold, bluntly, that Labour was seen as not strong enough on crime, which is a terrible position to be in, partly because Labour's got a very strong record on crime and policing. Look back to the days of tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. And crime is an issue that affects communities up and down the country, which ought to be at the heart of Labour's concern, particularly on issues like antisocial behaviour. So I think people can judge from this, the next Labour government will be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime.
Is this all part of a deliberate drive to show people that Corbynism is dead?
I think the important thing is we show the voters that we got the message when they inflicted the worst defeat on the Labour Party since 1935. And it would be supremely arrogant for the Labour Party to say to the voters, thanks for the kicking you gave us, but we've decided we're still right, you were wrong, and we're not going to change. So the positions that we've just discussed, whether on tough action on terrorism or action to protect communities from antisocial behaviour and other crime, I would describe as mainstream, traditional Labour positions that sadly we deviated from for about 5 years or so, and we're back to that place that people expect the Labour Party, demand the Labour Party be in, of taking tough action on crime.
When Keir Starmer ran for Labour leader, he did promise to bring the movement together and to retain the radicalism of the last 4 years. He's gone back on that, hasn't he?
No, we've got really big challenges, particularly coming out of the pandemic, and it requires big answers, whether it's the threat of climate change, and look at the images we've seen with the storms this week, look at what happened with the fires in Greece, issues around the world. Labour has got a really bold and ambitious programme for climate change adaptations, mitigations. It's the most ambitious programme put forward by any party. We've got bold, radical ideas, but they're also credible, believable and rooted in Labour's mainstream tradition that has carried right through like a golden thread from the government of Clement Attlee through to Harold Wilson through to Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and that's the mainstream Labour tradition that will be making an offer to the country at the next election.
Wes Streeting, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, a new series of Inside Culture with Mary Beard starts this Friday on BBC Two. The first episode explores how women have been viewed in stories and images over thousands of years and asks what that means for those in positions of power today. While looking for an answer, she spoke to women who have reached the highest levels of politics, including